Two retired detectives that were in the thick of New York crime, fast and hectic. They got some stories and some jokes, even an interview with the most popular folks. Off the cuff, one episode just ain't enough. Get a little laughter and an interview too. It's maybe the best thing you can do.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, Bill Cannon, retired NYPD Detective Sergeant. And with me tonight, and on most nights, is my co-host, straight out of Brooklyn, retired NYPD Detective Phil Grimaldi. What's up, Phil?
Not too much, Billy. I'm interested to see how they do things across the pond.
Well, you know, we brought specifically someone from across the pond. And,
I wish you had brought me across the pond. I could have done with it.
Yeah, that's right. We're bringing you via StreamYard. We couldn't afford to fly you over here. Maybe one day when Police Off the Cuff blows up, we'll fly our guests over here. You know, we'll take you out drinking and stuff like that. You know, because I'm sure you're no stranger to the pint, right?
No, I'm no stranger to the pubs in New York as well. In Meatpackers District, I've had a few drinks around there in the past.
That's excellent. So a lot of people looking forward to this. You know, it's folks. How rude of me. Tonight, our guest is Stephen Keogh. He's a retired 30-year veteran of Scotland Yard, and in Britain they call them inspectors. We call them detectives. You guys are inspectors. An inspector on our job is a very high ranking. It's a police officer, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy inspector, inspector. So it's a big boss, though. It's, you know, more of a administrative job. But
I think I would have been equivalent to a lieutenant, I think. So it's
okay. So
constable,
you do have
sergeant, inspector.
And were you responsible for the supervision of others?
Yeah.
Oh, you are? Okay.
So it's the third rank. So you start off at constable, then sergeant, and then inspector. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Because see, on the NYPD, anyone a sergeant and above, you're considered a boss. And people in the NYPD, they'll even refer to you as boss, which I never was very comfortable with when people would say, hey, boss.
It's different for us. If you're a sergeant, they call you sarge or skipper. And then when you're an inspector above, then it's boss, governor, whatever.
I used to demand early in my career that they call me Supreme Commander.
I'm sure that went over big.
Well, they liked it because it was funny, you know. They were like, they would go over the radio, Supreme Commander, you on the air, you know.
That was your handle on the radio.
Yeah, no, it was funny, you know. You have to have a sense of humor in this business.
Oh yeah, definitely, 100%. Yeah,
you know, and you know something. That's why I knew, like, when we invited you on the show, there would be no introduction. Cops are the same all over the damn world. We all know each other. We all have the same feelings. We all have the same intuition, and we all have the same macabre sense of humor because that's what you need to survive, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I've dealt with some horrible things in my time, and it's that camaraderie. And I always describe it as like if someone was to see what you were laughing at that time, it would be really awkward. And you're not doing it out of malice. There's no hidden agenda there. It's how you get through. You're dealing with some horrible sights, and if you didn't have that, it would be 10, 15 times harder.
You know, Steve, I want to get something over with.
Go on.
Here we go.
I want to get this over with. My British Bobby helmet. It's not fitting too well.
I think you need a bigger hat.
I told you the story earlier, but I had to show it, and there goes the badge, fell right off it. But I'll tell the story to the audience. Years ago, when I was an anti-crime sergeant, one of my cops was a boxer, and he fought for the PBA boxing team. And he went to London to fight the Bobbies, him and the PBA boxing team. And, you know, those guys, they used to have a ball because they would go to England, they would go to Ireland, and the Bobbies would come to the U.S., and the Irish guys would come to the U.S. And really, it wasn't a boxing club; it was a drinking society. But they masqueraded behind being boxers. In fact, Joe Murray, a good friend of ours, who's an attorney, he was on the boxing team. He was a heavyweight. I always try to ask him how he did against the Bobbies. He won't talk. He doesn't have anything to say about it.
I think not talking is speaking volumes.
Well, that's when he takes his own advice that he gives his clients. You have the right to remain silent.
Say nothing.
He doesn't want to talk about how he did against the Bobbies. I know he's going to pop up somewhere and go, "Hey, Bill, stop telling stories about me." Anyway, maybe we should get into like actual law enforcement and what we're talking about. And one of the things, Steve, you were a homicide investigator, and not just homicide, major crimes. Because as a country, how many murders do you think you get in a whole year in Great Britain?
So I can only go off the year 2020. I think it was 650 in the country.
In the entire country? Okay.
Yeah. And in London, we had about 140 of them, I think. So
yeah, and London is
probably quite low figures, aren't they, compared to the States?
Well, Chicago and some of the big cities are now getting 500-600 a year. Just cities. Yeah,
That's crazy.
But it's crime is up. Murder specifically is up 30% since since Biden took over. I don't want to blame it on him.
I don't want to blame it on him,
but well, it is very political. It is very political. And something I love, I spoke one time to another sergeant who was a radio show. I won't say his name. And I started talking about things. So he goes, "I don't want to get political." I said, "Dude, let's not talk about police work. You cannot avoid politics and talk about police work. Impossible."
Do you mind if I do?
I think they go hand in hand, Bill. I mean, especially in the NYPD. Anytime you have a high-profile case, you know that there's always, different things, intuition, I call it, from City Hall and from upper management in the NYPD, on how to handle the case. Instead of leaving it to the detectives to detect, they always want to put their 2 cents in. And a lot of times we would just say, we're doing that. And we would do what we were doing originally, But politics definitely plays a part. Same thing for you, Steve. Does politics come into?
No, you saying that, Phil? We don't. The only time this happened, so in the last year, a police officer got shot in. It was a really sad case. So he was a custody sergeant. So when the prisoners come in, he booked them in, and someone got arrested and they didn't search them properly. And what ended up with the sergeant got shot. And that's the only case I can say, hand on heart, I dealt with where I felt that people were interfering from up top. They just leave us alone. We've probably got a different structure. The politicians have nothing to do with our investigations. They don't get anywhere close to them. The only people that would stick their oar in sometimes would be senior officers. But that was only like this one because it was a police officer got shot, so everybody wanted to put their oar in.
You can understand it if it's a cop getting shot, but Billy will probably be able to tell you. I mean, he worked in Manhattan for a lot of years. God forbid a tourist gets injured or, during a robbery or shot and killed or something like that. That's high profile to us. And they're always, what's going on with the case. They want updates. Right. And then before you know it, somebody from the chief of detective's office is telling you, go do this and go do that. Right, Bill? Wouldn't you?
Well, yeah. And it's also, there's politics according to the geographic area where the murder occurs. For example, if something happens in Central Park, it's like bring in the National Guard, aviation, K9, mounted, emergency service.
Right.
They want to show a force. Same thing at the Upper East Side, that area from 59th Street to 96th Street, from 5th to the river. It's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods. And, people would like to say in the police business that all murders get treated the same way. And that's bullshit. Right. If a murder happens in one of those wealthy areas, and probably people, if they're listening to this at 1PP, they're probably cringing right now. Who is this guy? Well, he retired 10 years ago. We can't lay a glove on him.
You sure he's retired?
You sure he's retired? We want to get him, But no, the truth is that look, New York City is the media capital of the world too. So when it happens in these areas, the areas I suggested, Central Park, the Upper East Side, the Upper West Side, certain areas downtown, even Midtown, Manhattan is the gold standard of New York City. And when things happen there, the press is all over it. And they pour gasoline on a fire and they print stuff, whether it's true or not. If they don't have the facts, they'll make it up, you know?
Mm.
You know what, Billy? There's another component to that too. I agree with you 100%. A lot of stories are media driven. If they could catch, a little, if it starts to grow legs, the story, and it's popular in the news cycle, they can push it out there and they can drive a lot of attention toward it, and then eventually the politicians start to put pressure on the police department, and then the police commissioner or the chief of detectives is putting pressure on the detectives. But also another part of it is the different people that pull the purse strings on the politicians. There's different groups in the city that, they'll throw a lot of money when a politician is running for election, and they know how to get the attention of the police department. And I'm sure I'm not going to mention what particular group, but there's a couple of groups in New York City that will pull the strings of the mayor's office and the police commissioner's office like that. And all of a sudden, it could be a broken window on a store and they got a fixed post in front of it. Broken window is not really a big deal, so to speak. But if it's the right political background of the person that owns that store, there's a fixed post in front of it.
Right. We don't get any of that. I can't be honest. Everything you're saying to me, I've never seen in my 30 years.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. I feel quite lucky.
All right, Steve, let me run a scenario by you, all right?
Go
on. There's a murder in someone's flat, and I use that word flat because I know it's a British term. It's a female, and she's stabbed to death. Tell me, all right, you get the call. How do you first of all, how do you get notified of that?
All right. So we probably work slightly different to you. So we work in teams, and in London there are 20 murder teams, and each team will consist of a detective chief inspector, 2 detective inspectors, 4 detective sergeants, and about 16 to 18 detective constables. And every day there are 3 of those teams on call, covering different parts of London. And so the uniform turn up and they put a call in, and then we'll get a call from I thought you would call it dispatch. We got a unit, like a control room would call us. We'd send a car down initially, be a DS and 2 DCs. And then we'd start the investigation that way. And then we investigate as a whole team. So every murder would have 25 detectives on it. And each detective would have a separate role within it. So if you got CCTV, forensics, witnesses, we've got family liaison officers. I don't know if you have family liaison officers there. They get embedded with the family. And each detective would have a particular role within the job. And then every day we're having meetings and bringing it all together. So that's probably slightly different, is it, to how you?
No, it's somewhat similar. Like you said, a family like liaison. We have people called community affairs that are cops that don't want to do anything. They wear these light blue jackets and they get promoted to grade. No,
our family liaison officers are actually detectives within the team, and they're actually a really important role because how much information do families have? So our detectives are going in there, and part of their job isn't just to tell the family what's going to happen. That's part of it. But it's also to get the information from the family. And you can imagine on some investigations where potentially, we're talking about Summer Wells' case, where potentially you've got suspects within the family, having a detective in there with them all the time, it can be crucial, and it can be the difference between solving a case or not. So I know what you're saying, but it is a detective role as opposed to like that sort of go on and put an arm around someone, and it's not that sort of thing. They're in there investigating.
See, Steve, the difference of what you're describing, we sort of have a same type of thing, but the case detective would be the one that deals with the family, totally deals with the family, and we respond also as teams. And like my job in homicide, if I was the ranking investigator on the scene, I would run the investigation, and en route to the scene, if the body went to the hospital, I would send detectives to the hospital. I would send detectives to the crime scene. I would send detectives to the building to do a canvas. If we had information that the perpetrator fled somewhere and we knew who he was, I would send detectives en route to where he probably was. So
Right.
it was
Yeah.
all, we would do all this communication en route to the scene. And most of the time, I would say, we got a lot of shooting murders. So most of the time, the body was in the hospital, whether
Right.
it was alive or dead. So the hospital became such an important scene, always an important scene. And sending detectives, I always had a guy who always wanted to go to the hospital. And the reason being because he didn't want to do shit. And I used to say, no, you're not going to the hospital.
I thought you were going to say his girlfriend worked there.
No.
He's got things
because,
for nurses.
it's because, and then he wouldn't even do a DD5 for his response there, So I knew his whole act. I go, no, you go somewhere else,
Yeah.
His whole act,
You're cramping his style, Bill.
Yeah, look, I'm such a cynical. I put down community affairs, the guy who always wants to go to the hospital. But look, the response to the scene of a homicide is so damn important.
Yeah, we call it the golden hour.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's where most evidence is abundantly available. I always equate when you think of murder investigations, it's the same as anything in anything in life. The foundations you lay, that very start of an investigation, is going to have a massive impact on how successful you are. And it's like if you build a house. If you build a house and you don't put good foundations, it's going to fall down. If you start an investigation and you don't get that first part wrong, the crime scene, the first hours, the chances of you solving it are going to be really impacted. So yeah, it's huge. That first part of the investigation is huge.
Well, Steve, one of the things that no detective wants to do, and it's really important, is building canvases. That's like
we call it house to house. Yeah.
House to house. Yeah, we call it a canvas. Yeah. And it's very involved. And if you get the wrong people doing that, again, you got to get people that aren't going to say negative results, because you should never write negative results after you spoke to someone. I spoke to so-and-so, and this is who I spoke to at such and such time. And they said they did not see anything or hear anything. That's important. Where if you just put negative results, that's the lazy man's way of, because later on that person could say, I didn't say that. I told the detective this, and this. Well, he wrote negative results. Then you need to send him for retraining,
Yeah.
Because
it's one of those jobs that no one wants, isn't it? Because it's not the sexiest part, is it?
No, right. Doing a building canvas, you're going to be waking people up out of bed. They're going to be showing up in nasty outfits, to the door,
With bad breath.
Yeah, bad breath, coming out of bed, and they're not going to be happy to be woken up. But a canvas is a very important thing to do, as you know.
Canvas is when I worked in the 6-0 squad, we had a lot of high-rise buildings, 20 floors and stuff. And I wouldn't be caught dead in one of these buildings without having 2 guns on me. That's how dangerous they were. So, in the projects in Coney Island, 2 guys went on a canvas. You didn't do it by yourself. You stayed on the floor together. And again, it was like Billy said, the stairways are filled with piss and urine and feces and God knows what else. The elevators, most of the time, they weren't even working. So you were dealing with a shitty atmosphere, a shitty element. And you're 100% right, Bill. Nobody wanted to do that. But again, it's real important, because you knock on the right door and you might be knocking on the door that solves the whole case. So we took them seriously. I mean, sometimes, you went to a door and the person was, I don't know, intoxicated, or, just you knew that they weren't going to supply any relative information. We would either write no response, meaning that they weren't home, or, or the person had nothing to add, didn't see or hear anything, like Billy said, But one of the other things I was going to ask, like you were talking about how you have a would you call it a family liaison person is assigned?
Family liaison, yeah.
A lot of times that would be whoever's assigned to the case. Now in teams, we would go out in teams, and it would go like chance of peace, and it would just go around, and whoever the case detective was, as Billy stated, would probably be the person would have the most contact. That detective and probably the partner would have the most contact with the family. But sometimes a dynamic didn't work out. In a case I could recall where a guy who was in my team, he was having a little bit of an issue with the family. And I said, let me handle him, and I started a report. There was a young 19-year-old kid that was killed. He was on college break and he was killed for no reason. It was really, really sad case. It took us about a year. We knew who the guy was right away, but it took us about a year to get him. And we actually wound up on America's Most Wanted with that case. And he lost touch with the family a little bit. They were they were, they were upset. They lost their 19-year-old son. So I jumped in and I became the liaison with the family for, maybe 3 or 4 weeks or so. And then eventually we wound up catching up with the guy and putting him behind bars. So I guess, that would be how we would handle that. Billy was talking about the community affairs. They're pretty, like he was saying, they're not always the Pistol Pete firecracker cops that want to, jump out and do everything, but they do have a good rapport with the community. A lot of times they can listen. They've given some information sometimes that they've gotten through sources. So I guess they have their place in the whole thing, but I guess that was interesting. And you called him like a detective constable or a detective sergeant. So there's no actual detective rank. Am I right on that, Steve?
Yeah. So our ranks are constable, sergeant, inspector, chief inspector, and then it gets into superintendent, chief superintendent. And that's the same for detectives and uniform. And once you become a detective, you just put a D in front. So you're a detective constable, detective sergeant, detective inspector. But there is no rank of detective on its own, no.
On our job, it's a lateral rank where when you're a police officer, you're sworn as a police officer. If you want to become a detective, you start to go into investigation. You're appointed detective, yes, but sergeant, lieutenant, captain, and then once you go above captain, it's all appointments as well.
Right.
But detectives, sometimes there's specialists that we have in the NYPD, like emergency service guys, the guys that do all the, they carry the heavy artillery. They'll go up on the bridge when a guy's going to jump and, tie themselves up. And
elbows mum. That sounds like that's a British term, elbows mum. Thanks for joining our YouTube and being a family member of Police Off the Cuff. Folks, if you want to watch Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories from the perspective of NYPD and see really sexy detectives from across the pond, then join then join our YouTube, subscribe to us, hit that bell, give us a thumbs up, because we're going to keep bringing in people like Steve Keogh here and hear about what it's like to solve murders in Great Britain. It's not very much different than us. There's some differences, but one of the things I wanted to get to, Stephen, and to me, it's one of the most important things. And we solved more murders through interview and interrogation than through any other means. And that includes, you don't. Well, that includes evidence, that includes crime scene, that includes forensic. Talking to people solved more murders. And one of the things that we do, and it's called, and I don't know if you call it the same thing, it's called victimology. And what that means.
I'm sorry, you're talking about interviewing people or not the suspects? You're talking about
interview. People. Yeah, but an interview can turn into an interrogation.
Yeah, sorry, I thought you were talking about the killers themselves. But
Steve, I'm going to bring on someone from Great Britain to be an interpreter between the New York guys and you. I thought we would be able to understand each other.
We should have got all this ironed out, the difference in terminology before.
That's right. We should have had a little glossary,
Yeah, can I just say, Elbows is one of my mods. So yes, he's brilliant.
Fuzzy Doxy, thanks you so much for the $9.99 super chat. Thanks again for always having the best shows and the most interesting people on it. That must be another fan of yours, Steve. My God,
I've never met Fuzzy, but I like.
You never met. I said. Did I say Fuzzy or Foxy? Fuzzy Doxy. It is
Fuzzy Doxy.
Fuzzy Doxy. I'm sorry. That's my eyes playing tricks on me. Thank you so much for the super chat. But Steve, what I was talking about, and we're gonna at some point segue into the Summer Wells case a little bit. And then I don't know if you're familiar with the Gabby Petito and the Brian Laundrie case. We'll touch upon that. We're not going to do a deep dive because we've done deep dives into that before. And I don't want to put you on the spot if you're not as familiar with it as we are. But one of the things that we always, and when I talk about victimology, what I'm referring to is the study of the background of the victim.
Yeah, and we use that same term. Yeah.
I'm sure, and there's something called mind mapping, or it's in a computer. It's called something different. I forget what it's called.
He's putting on his professor hat.
I was once a professor, but I got kicked out, and that's why I have this podcast now. It's called data mining. And
right, I've not heard of that.
what that basically means, if I looked into your background, I would look into
Don't.
I won't look into it. All he does is spend his time at the old sod pub all day. And he stiffed the bartender the last time he was there. Oh, in England, you call them barmen. They're barmen in England, right? They're not called bartenders.
Yeah,
But,
barman, yeah.
Anyway, so what that means is basically data mining or mind mapping is just looking into every aspect of the person's life, their work.
Yeah, we've got a saying in the UK, to know how someone died, you need to know how they lived, and
point.
that sort of sums it up.
You Brits put it such a cool way. I like that.
Short and sweet and simple, but right to the point. I like it.
Yeah, we don't waste words. We can get it in 10, we'll do it.
We kind of do the same thing. We'll do, listen, anybody that we're targeting for, being possibly a suspect in a murder, we're going to run their background, their criminal history. And then we use different search engines now, Faces of the Nation, and there's a few other, LexisNexis, and it gives you all the information on, the person's history regarding, property that they own, licenses they have, all different things like that. And that kind of gives you one area of their background. And then once you talk, like Bill was saying, a lot of the cases that I worked on was solved by interview and interrogation. You build a rapport with them, you pick up on some body language. And then, once you have a little history of who they are, where they were, maybe you know a little bit more about them than they think you know, and then they start to lie to you, and then you just drop the hammer and start hitting them with the facts, and you're facing 25 to life in jail, and it might be in your best interest to help us, and that's how we usually get things rolling with a confession. I think.
Hey, Steve, do you have the equivalent of Miranda warnings?
We have cautions. So when you arrest someone, you say, "I'm arresting you for murder because we've got information that you killed Joe Bloggs," and then we'll say, "You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned something which you later rely on in court." And what's that essentially is saying, you don't have to say anything to me, but if you do, we may use it at court. And if you don't say anything later on at court, they may wonder why you've not said anything. And basically, what it all boils down to is when we interview people, they don't say anything. So I would.
If I'm in a pub and some guy says to me, "I'm going to read you cautions," I know I'm trying to be funny. I'm sorry.
As a suspect. So our interviews, most of them, I mean, I can't put a figure on it, but it would be in the 90%. I would suggest when we interview people, they literally tell you nothing. They normally just say every question you answer, no comment, no comment, no comment. It's just a sad fact. So in my 12 years of investigating murder, we never had one person admit to murder on tape.
Wow.
They would admit to maybe carrying out the act and saying, "Well, I did it in self-defense," but no one said, "Yeah, I killed him." They just don't, because they get the solicitors come in, we call them solicitors, you call them lawyers, and their first advice is say nothing, and they don't.
Well, that's the same between across the pond and here. The lawyers do the same thing here, so that's 100%. But let me ask you: isn't the criminal justice system? See, now with us, we present all the evidence to the district attorney's office, which is the prosecutor, and from there we'll have the person. Once they're arrested, if the district attorney's office, they'll approve it. They'll say, "Okay, there's enough evidence. You have witnesses. You have this. You have that. We're going to go ahead with the charges." Then they'll pick up on the case. They're going to now try the case in court. Now, you guys, you don't have a jury, right? You have a 3-judge panel. Is that how that works?
No. It's what you've just described is exactly the same as here. We call them the Crown Prosecution Service, CPS. Exactly the same. So we do all the evidence gathering. We arrest. We go to them with the evidence, and they tell us whether to charge or not, and they pick it up and they provide. They will arrange for barristers to prosecute the case. It sounds exactly the same. It does sound exactly the same.
How many people?
And then we have jurors. We have jurors. 12 people on a jury.
Okay,
exactly the same.
Joe,
you have 12. I don't know if you have 12, but we have 12 people on a jury.
Yes, we have 12, and there's usually anywhere from 2 to 6 alternates in case somebody gets sick or they get bounced from the jury for specific.
Right.
reason.
Okay. We don't have them.
Joe Kane from Finest Financial. Thank you so much for the $10 super chat. Joe Kane is a retired NYPD captain and a big benefactor of this show. Thank you, Joe, for your contributions. Yeah, Joe helps. Stephen, I want to ask you something. And today in the Summer Wells case, they had about 120, 130 police personnel search an area that they weren't satisfied that was searched well enough. Yeah. During the early part of this investigation, because the vegetation was so thick and everything, and hot. It's hot now. It's cleared up. The season's changing and everything, and they did a better search. I don't know if they have any new information that led them to do that search, but one of the things we looked into in this case was we were all very suspicious of Candace and Don Wells. I'll just play a quick bit of their interview early on.
Yard by her swing. I feel in my heart that somebody has came up here and took her, has lured her away from here. Me and my mother and her were planting flowers, and we went in after we got done washing our hands, and she got a piece of candy from Grandma, and she wanted to go back over and see her brothers, and I said okay, and I walked her all the way over to the porch, and I watched her walk into the kitchen where the boys were watching TV. And I told the boys, I said, watch Summer, I'll be back. And within 2 minutes, I came back. And I asked the boys where their sister was, and they said, she went downstairs, Mom, to play with her toys in the playroom. I said, okay. And I yelled downstairs for her a couple times, and I didn't get no answer, which was unusual because usually she always answers me. And so I went down there to check, and she was nowhere in sight. She was just gone. I don't go on walks around here or runs because I'm scared of the bears and snakes and even the coyotes that are around here. Well, whoever has my daughter, I pray and hope that they have not harmed her and they bring her back to us safe and sound.
Just go to the FBI, the police, and clear it up. And I don't know, it seems kind of elusive.
It's really strange that I've never seen this truck, and I've never heard of it until just recently. But I wish they would come forward and explain themselves. I mean, if you're not...
Steve, you know nothing else about the case, but you watched that interview. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
I took a bit of a dive into this. The Grizzly channel. I went on there with Gisela, and we did a bit of hypothesizing. So I went on and approached it as we would investigate it from Scotland Yard. And so what we use, we probably exactly the same as you. I'm just probably just using different terminology. We form hypotheses. So we look at potential scenarios that could have happened that then lead on to investigative opportunities. So I looked at it, and there were four essentially. One was that she wandered off and had some sort of accident. One that she's come to harm within the family. 3, that she was taken off by someone known to the family, and 4, she was taken off by a complete stranger. I having looked at it, and I mean, I'm on the outside. I've got no inside information. I don't know what's been going on. But if they had harmed her 5 months later, surely they would have had some sort of evidence that she had come to harm within the house. So I tended to go towards she's been taken by someone they know or someone they don't know, and looking at everything and looking at that. What worries you? Look for red flags, don't you? When you're investigating, you look for some red flags, and some red flags from this family are the domestic violence on both sides, and there's an undertone of sexual assaults with Don sexually assaulting his sister and stuff. So if I was a betting man and I'd put some money on what had happened, it would be, for me, it would be that someone's taken her, but it's someone known to the family. That would be That would be my educated guess as an investigator.
Now,
You know,
with the fact of what Bill just said, just looking at that interview, forgetting, you seem to know a lot about what went on. But if you looked at that interview, now you were just talking to those people for the first time. The girl is reported missing a short time ago. What would you feel about them? I think that's what I'm really looking to get at.
Yeah, but I fully get that. I really do. That for me would prompt me to want to look at them more. I don't think I would assume they've done it on the basis of that, because I'm a bit wary where it comes to wary when it comes to trying to read people's body language when you don't know them very well, because you can get it wrong. That for me would lead me on to, right, I'm not happy. I would look into them. I don't think I would say they're guilty just on the back of it. I wouldn't. No. I don't jump to those conclusions. But it certainly would make me want to look into them more. 100%. Yeah.
They've told quite a tale of lies, I think, throughout the whole thing as well. And I think you hit the 4 scenarios that I think Bill and I came up with too. Either she was harmed somewhere, either before she got home or when she got home, something to that effect, or a stranger, someone known to her, or, she could have wandered off. The wandered off, I think, is almost zero because there was extensive searches done.
Yeah.
Now, the area that you were talking about that was searched today, Bill, was that close to the home, or was that far away?
I think that was further away from the home. It was, it was more like this huge, vast area that had such dense vegetation that they thought they could maybe search it now that some of the vegetation had receded. They had a drone. Look, Steve, I don't like these two. I don't like Summer and Summer. I don't like Candace, and I don't like Don Wells. I think both of them are bad people. And I know a lot of people that watch YouTube channels. They don't like to hear us say that. But I was a cop for 27 years, and I know bad people when I see them. The husband's a jailbird. He's an alcoholic. He's a drug addict. She's a mess. She's a total mess. She's a drug addict, has signs of being an alcoholic, has big time signs of mental illness. So, but I mean, with all those things, I don't trust them with their kids. And that's why they took their 3 sons away from them too. And if they didn't do this, I think at least the mother, Candace, she knows who did. I really feel that with all my heart. And look, in my 27 years in the NYPD, we never used a lie detector test ever did we use a lie detector. You know what our lie detector tests were? Good detectives.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Say. Yeah, we don't have them in the UK. We don't have them. What's the point of them? What's the point of they're not 100% reliable. They're about 80% reliable. So what is the point of giving someone a lie detector test if you can't trust it?
I think it derails the investigation. 100%. It makes people think, oh, they passed. It's like it's a spelling bee. Oh, they passed.
Yeah.
My experience with lie detectors in the NYPD, and my experience was we used it more on witnesses as opposed to perpetrators, because the district attorney's office, a lot of times, it was a drug murder, or, the person is involved in prostitution or whatever. So they wanted to make sure that they were telling the truth, because a lot of times they could be, maybe they had a problem with a pimp and they want to give him up for a murder now to get him out of their hair, So a lot of times they would use a lie detector to vet witnesses. But again, Billy, I think you hit it right on the head. We very rarely, I can't remember an exact time when we used a polygraph on an actual person that became a suspect. But, there's one point I want to make to you, Steve. We had a guy on the show by the name of Dade Rader from Midwest EquiSearch, which they're a volunteer search team. And initially I thought they were just, police buffs or whatever, but it turned out they were super professional. They're a great organization. They work on donations and volunteers. And he was actually on the scene at the Summerwells home. He participated in some of the searches. So the stranger coming onto the property, there was about 13 dogs on the property. I think that's really not in the equation so much. I think it's obviously could be possible. I think it's got a very low amount of percentage as being the cause of Summerwell's disappearance. And even with a person known to them that would have snuck onto the property, it wasn't dark out. It was early evening. It was 6:30 p.m. when she was reported. So it happened a little before that, according to what they say, if they're being truthful, which Bill and I have called into question a lot of things that they've
Mm.
said as not being truthful. And in the early stages of this investigation, when we went on, we called for the other children to be removed. And lo and behold, within a week of us saying it on the air, they were, there was an interdiction by
Yeah.
Child Protective Services that removed the
Yeah.
other 3 children. So I'm sure you know that there's the atmosphere in the home is not great, and I think that's why they probably removed the kids. So my feeling, and I think Bill is of the same feeling, our target would be Candace and Don to being responsible. As to being responsible, what happened now? There was a comment by a young lady, Marilyn Minetta, and she asked twice about this. She obviously didn't see any of our earlier shows. She asked about, was there an accident at the so-called garden, or did she die at the swimming hole? And she's asking if the police actually investigated that. I'm sure that they did. There could have been an accident. We've put that as one of the scenarios of possibilities in this case, that she either met with some type of an accident earlier in the day and then they just covered it up. They didn't want any police looking at them for different reasons, maybe because of narcotic use, or there was pending litigation with the Child Protective Services. So to answer that question, yes, there was police looking into both of those things. I don't think there was anything to it that they could put together to say there was an accident at the garden, which the garden is actually right outside the home. It's a piece of land. There's a trailer where the mother lived, which is like 20 feet from where the actual home is. And then the swimming hole, I'm sure that they looked at that and nothing has been recovered at the swimming hole. So to answer that for Marilyn Minetta.
Steve, and granted, there's a lot that we as YouTube content creators don't know because we're not privy to the day-to-day investigation, the case folder, what they found out, interviews. They must have interviewed the 3 boys. They must have interviewed the grandmother. They must have interviewed all the people in the church. We're not privy to any of that. But every time Candace and Don get put on some TV show or something, they give the same performance. And, like they were on Dr. Phil, who's useless. I don't know why you would go on Dr. Phil. What you need to do is to listen to me, like, why would you go on a dopey guy's show? There with his $50,000 watch, he's giving you advice, come on. I think he's ever
I found it was all a bit weird. Is this, I'm new to this. I'm very much only involved in British murders. I investigated them. If I was watching something on the news, it would be a British one. So this is all quite new to me. And I found the way that the press have access to the family as bizarre. I've never seen it played out before.
Something. God bless you, because
I was just gonna say
we were like, there's been a few content creators here that were all over the family, and if I was running the investigation for the NYPD and a content creator from YouTube stepped all over the case, I would go visit that guy.
Absolutely,
and he would never again speak to another principal on that case because he would be scared. Yeah, it was disgusting.
I was discussing this with Gisela. So if we go back to where we was talking about with the family liaison officers, part of their job would be protecting the family from the press. And if they were to speak to them, it would be arranged through the police. The officer would be there. And if they don't like the line of questioning, they would go, sorry, and they would take them away. It looks to me like they've just been. Now, I was discussing this as whether this was a tactic. They've just thrown. It's like they've been thrown to the wolves, and they're just letting them run to see if they catch themselves out. If they say something, and they can come and get them. If it's not, I don't understand.
Well, you know what it is? Hawkins County Police Department. I mean, I'm sure they've never worked a case this big before.
No.
And I don't mean, I'm sure they've worked murders, I'm sure they've done, but a case that's blown up like this as an international missing person case.
Yeah. They're probably understaffed to handle this.
Well, that too, but I think they were intimidated by maybe saying something to some of these people that were crossing the line and speaking to principals in this case. As I said, if I was in New York City and someone, whether YouTube or someone else was stepping on our case,
you wouldn't.
They would hear from me immediately.
In
person.
I don't want to go off tangent, but I'm for my YouTube channel next week. I'm doing something on the Delphi murders, and I don't want to go off tangent, but again, that's a high profile murder being investigated. And one of the first press conferences, they asked the sheriff, when's the last homicide within this county? And he didn't know. And have you ever investigated a double murder or a child murder? And the answer was no. And when's the last case from the NYPD that is on national news like this? And I do worry when I see these
today.
It happens all the time. It happens
in terms of high profile, a year later, when you're looking at it and you're questioning the investigation.
Right.
And I look at these counties, and I'm not having a pop at them, and I don't know what they're like, but I worry that this is all a bit much for them.
It is.
And when
Steve, I 100% agree with you. And also, like, people are under the misnomer that the FBI is all that. You get the FBI from Tennessee. The guy's, he's also got a straw hat on, and he's wearing sandals. So like, it's like people give oh my God, the FBI, the premier lord. The FBI couldn't shine the rack of a New York City cop. I'm telling you that right now. And as far as murder, if they would have came to Manhattan North, we'd be like, let's go sit in the coffee room. We'll take care of this.
They handle a lot of white collar stuff, and they do handle some profile cases. But again, on a day-to-day basis, the homicides that we investigated, and just to give you an idea, now you in the early part of the show, you were saying how different people would get assigned different things. When we went out on a homicide case, we would go out on them so frequently that we would go out like an army. It would be a team of guys, and everybody knew, like, the main detective who was catching the case, he would stay with the main witness. And then other guys, the sergeant would say, all right, guys, go do a canvas in that building, go do a canvas in that building. And guys really didn't even have to be told a lot of times. Everybody knew their role, or they would just start doing stuff and say, all right, I'm going to notify crime scene. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to get I'm going to go over to the hospital to do an interview. So again, when you don't do it on a regular basis, they're getting hit with all of this at once. And if it's high profile, like Summer Wells or even Gabby Petito, I don't think there was anything more high profile in the last 5 or 10 years than that case. That was really a high profile.
And it crossed jurisdictions. It crossed different states. It started out on Long Island, Florida, Moab in Wyoming. So, which means it crossed different FBI offices, different police jurisdictions. And that always makes it more complicated. Steve, could you hang on 1 second? I'm going to have Phil do a quick commercial break, and then we'll get right back. This is so interesting to me.
It really is.
That you're covering the Delphi case. I'm familiar with it. Those two girls walking in the park, and they were both murdered. I understand. It's really a tough case.
That's a whodunit for sure.
Absolutely. Phil, here we go, buddy.
Have you found yourself in a jam? Are you in need of legal counsel in the New York area? Do you need a victim's advocate? Well, Joe Murray is your man. He's not only an experienced trial attorney, he's also a retired 15-year member of the NYPD. He literally knows both sides of the fence. His website is jmurray-law.com. His telephone number is 646-838-1702, or you could email Joe at jmurray-law.com.
Good read, Phil. So, Steve, a lot of these cases, you're right. It's just like we talk about the system of murder in this country. Like, there's a coroner system and there's a medical examiner system. A coroner can just be an elected official with virtually almost no experience in investigating murders. And it should really be nationally required to have certain credentials to go to a homicide scene, and there has to be, at the minimum, every single scene should be investigated somewhat the same way.
So we've got that system here. So we call them pathologists, same job, but just different name. And they're a very small number, and they're called Home Office approved pathologists, and they're the only ones that can get involved with homicides. And there's probably no more than about a dozen of them in the country. The normal pathologists wouldn't be allowed to touch a murder. And
Steve, what we have is someone called medical legal investigators, and they're required to be physician's assistants, and they work for the medical examiner's office. Now they cannot touch the body till after our crime scene unit is done collecting all the evidence, photographing, all of that
Yeah.
stuff, because or
Same
else
as us. Yeah.
they would tamper with the scene. But once our crime scene unit, and that's also a very specific unit, and not all jurisdictions have that. We have guys that just do crime scene work.
Yeah.
Which is great because you imagine Phil and I showing up to a crime scene. Oh no, I got to do this. I got to, so we have people that are specifically trained and good at that stuff.
Yeah,
because you
100%.
have to really have an affinity to collect evidence. So they do all of their work, and we don't have to worry about that. And we, of course, talk with them before.
We direct them from time
right?
to time.
We talk to them before and after the crime scene is processed. So I would imagine you have something similar.
It's exactly the same. What you're describing to me is exactly what we've got. Yeah, and it has to be that way, doesn't it?
Very important.
Maybe 100 years ago, detectives might have taken fingerprints and stuff, but you can't.
Right, with the
You need an
magnifying glass
expert.
and the dust.
Yeah, you need an expert. And we tend to have forensic scientists. So in London, we've got our own lab where we've got forensic scientists. So, for instance, blood pattern analysis, they will come out and do that work for us. Luminol, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, we've got.
Steve, there's those guys that do bloodstain pattern analysis. They got to be a little strange. You know what I mean? To want to do that, to go into like meat lockers and hit a big piece of meat with a bat to see where the spatter shows up on the wall, and then they study it and they're like, "Hey."
Yeah. I've got to be honest, though, the weirdest people I've ever come across are the mortuary technicians, the ones that do the cutting up of the bodies
no doubt.
They're scooping up some horrible stuff sometimes. Yeah,
100%. Yeah,
we're very lucky in the NYPD that we have the crime scene unit because they're really, really good. There's a lot of detectives that are in that unit, and they get tremendous training. And a lot of times in different states, they have the state police will have crime scene units specifically trained. And I think that's what happened maybe in the Gabby Petito case. They had the state police come in and they helped with the investigation when her body was found. So, and a lot of times I think the FBI was involved in that. The FBI has a great crime lab, probably the best in our country for sure. So they're probably not very good at doing interview and interrogation, but they do have the best crime labs.
See, I don't want to drag this back to the Delphi case, but one of the things I did notice on that, so which I couldn't quite get my head around. So you had a sheriff's department, the city police, the state police, and the FBI. You think, well, who's in charge? How do you run an investigation where you've got so many different people with different interests?
Well, Steve, that becomes a problem. And for example, on December 7th, and I don't mean to segue to advertising for our show, but I am going to, we have a woman coming on named Michelle McPhee, who wrote a book called Mayhem, and it's about the Boston Marathon bombing. And same thing there. Now, Boston Police Department is an extremely, extremely competent police department, much like the NYPD. They're excellent. So the amount of head banging between them and the FBI must have been off the charts.
Yeah.
Because, really top-notch police departments don't play well for the most part with the FBI. And that goes right to the top. The big bosses, I'm sure the head chief or the Boston police commissioner was not taking it from, Biff Donaldson, the officer in charge. What do they call him? The SAC? Senior officer in charge, a special agent in charge. I'm sure that they were not like, going home and having coffee together or having a drink at the end of the day. So
we don't have anything equivalent to that. We don't have an FBI. We don't have federal crimes.
You don't have the MI6?
MI6 are a military intelligence for abroad. MI5 are an intelligence in the UK, but they've got nothing to do with law enforcement. So I spent some years on dealing with terrorists, and we worked with MI5, but they provided us with the intelligence for us to go and do the work. They would never get involved in the actual police work itself. So when we turn up to a murder, it's our murder. There's no one is going to come in and try and do it jointly with us. No one's going to try and take it over. We're not going to hand it on to anyone. I like that. Clean. We know what we're doing. This is why I can't get my head around 4 different units all involved in the same thing.
Steve, if you look in New York City, the amount of law enforcement agencies that work in New York City is beyond belief. The DEA, the ATF, the FBI. I mean, there's so many federal
Marshals,
agencies,
yeah.
marshals, NYPD. Then they got the state police because Cuomo, was politically put the state police to make himself look good. Now he's not looking so good anyway. So,
By the way, CNN suspended his brother tonight.
did they really?
Yeah, I just got it on my phone a little while ago.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love that whole family, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't know if Steve knows who we're talking about, but that's
I've
the
no
governor
idea.
of New York. The governor of New York he was not good. He killed 15,000 people at the during the coronavirus outbreak. He took elderly people and put them into nursing homes with COVID positive, and it just turned into a whole mess. Never would own up to it, and he just recently stepped down. But his brother works for CNN, and they found out that he was helping him during the criminal investigation that took place on his shenanigans, and he was actually helping him. It was exposed in a hearing, and so they suspended him now. But
Right.
and Steve, they named the bridge after his father. And we didn't like that either. They named it.
I found out there's actually a petition to take the naming away.
It used to be the Tappan Zee Bridge, and
Yeah.
Andrew Cuomo named it the Mario M. Cuomo Bridge. Never
Wow.
asked anyone, just named it after his father.
Yeah,
I think they should have named it after Ted Kennedy. The Can I Reach the Other Side Bridge, I don't know.
We would have Boris Johnson renaming London Bridge after his dad.
Yeah, after it falls down, London Bridge is falling down. The same thing with the Tappan Zee. We're almost at an hour. I want to get to something. I want to play a little bit of this and ask you.
I guess my vibe is I hear them be in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood. I've just been really stressed. I had so much work I was doing on my computer this morning.
What do you do for a living?
Well, I used to work at an organic juice bar, but I just quit my job.
Okay.
I was a nutritionist. That was my
That's
job.
cool.
And I just quit my job to travel across the country. And I'm trying to start a blog. I have a blog and stuff. So I've been building my website. So I've just been really stressed and he doesn't really believe that I could do any of it. So that's kind of been I don't know, he's been down there. I don't know, we've just been fighting all morning and he wouldn't let me in the car before.
Well, you know what happened. I don't have time to show the whole thing, but this case took on a whole new life after this day, and this happened on August 12th. I believe her body was discovered on August 27th, which was 15 days after this alleged domestic violence incident. A lot of people really wanted to hang the Moab police, even though when we watched it, they'd spent 45 minutes to an hour basically adjudicating or investigating this case, and their determination after that amount of time was to arrest no one, to separate them, and to send Brian Laundrie on his way and to send her on her way separately. Whether they had made an arrest that day, if that would have saved her life or not, I don't know.
You don't know, do you?
What are your thoughts?
So in the UK, we have a positive arrest policy when it comes to domestic violence, and it doesn't necessarily mean someone's going to end up getting charged, but most cases where we're called to a domestic violence, someone's going to get arrested, and it's to prevent what happened. Is to prevent domestic murders, and we learned the hard way when I first joined the police in '91. Unless we were arresting someone for it's particularly when women are being controlled in domestic violence situations generally, and they find it very difficult to go to the police officer and be honest and say what the man has done because they're being controlled. So you take that out of their hands rather than waiting to be told he's hit me, he's done this over the time, whatever. You take that out of their hands. Generally, it's going to be the man. Unfortunately, it's going to be the man that gets arrested, and then you're in a much stronger position once he's been taken away. You can talk to her where she doesn't feel that she's got the pressure of him looking at him, hearing her, etc. I would have thought in this country that I would imagine he would have got arrested.
Well, we have something called the primary aggressor, and the police are given the task of determining who the primary aggressor is or was. And that's the person that gets arrested. In this incident, if you watched that incident, it appeared that she was the primary aggressor on that scene because he had cuts to his face and she had cuts to his arm. But they, but then they also, which we weren't aware of at the time when we made our judgments of this, they had a call stating that someone saw him hit her. So that would have flipped the whole thing for us.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
in a situation like that, myself responding to the scene as a patrol supervisor, I may have arrested both of them.
Yeah, it's definitely an option. But I don't think you can just walk away, and sending them off in different directions is a bit, well, they're going to meet up again. And whatever's happened is going to carry on, isn't it?
Yes.
They did a little bit more than that, Steve. What they did was they made Gabby stood with the van because the van was registered in her name, and they made him go to a hotel overnight. Now, you brought up Giesler earlier, you did her show. She brought up a point that maybe somebody should have checked in on them the next day, which I thought was an excellent point. But you're right. Unfortunately, they went off in different directions, but they met up again the next day, and 15 days later, she was dead. But,
all I would say is very easy sometimes to sit and judge these situations. But all of us throughout our career, how many times have we been in a situation where we've made a decision that could have gone completely wrong, and then later on you look at it? So, although I'm saying that in this country they've probably been arrested, it's very easy after the fact, isn't it, to point fingers and say this could have happened.
Steve, that is such a great point. You're right. You as a boss, myself as a boss, I made thousands of decisions and without thinking twice. And my policy pretty much was when I went to a domestic violence incident, if someone was hit or if they even crossed the line at all, someone was getting locked up, because it was much easier for me to lock someone up and not have to worry, what was this going to turn into a homicide the next day? And all the cops on the scene, when that happens, you know who they're pointing at? Sergeant Cannon. He was on the scene. Sergeant Cannon was on the scene, and he left and said no arrest. You know how long it would take them to give me up? About 15 seconds. You know what I mean?
100%.
So I always made the right decision. So I didn't have them pointing at Sergeant Cannon.
Yeah, that's a tricky call. But you know what? Listen, initially she did say that he hit me. That she did say I hit him, and he said, well, she was going to get my attention and the phone hit me in the face. So he was almost covering for us. So in the initial part of that interview, because if you watch that whole thing, you're almost like saying, well, he's the primary aggressor. But then later on, they find out that there was a call that said that he struck her. That's when they called the police. But again, they really pressed her. They separated them. They put her in the back of the car with the air conditioning. She calmed down because she was really, really upset in the beginning of the when the police first got on the scene. But if the whole body cam footage, if you look at it, I think those cops really tried hard to get it out of her, to say, listen, and she was apologetic for the whole thing. He was almost like a devil in disguise, I guess you could call it, because as it turned out, he more than likely was the one that killed her 15 days later. So yeah, I mean, in the video, he did some things that Bill and I, noticed. He was almost like a little too cooperative with the police, which was kind of a little bit of a red flag, So there were some things, but listen, we call that Monday morning quarterbacking. If you could look at something after the fact, you could point out all the things, but I don't think that they actually pulled out the statute of the law when you have to make an arrest on a domestic violence situation. They read it from their phones. They went over it with the boss, and they decided to separate them. That was a unfortunate decision that was made. Maybe it would have changed things. We really don't know. It's 15 days later. But
if you could look at a different angle, how do those officers feel now? I always think that.
Yeah,
they're going to live with that, aren't they, for the rest of their lives? Yeah. We're second guessing them, but they're going to be second guessing themselves. And I always look at it that, because having been there myself, sometimes for the grace of God, you could have been in that situation when you've made a decision and it could have come back and bitten you. And I do feel sorry for those officers, because if it was just they turn up, they spent 2 minutes with 2 minutes with him and gone is one thing. But from what you're saying, they've tried their best.
They really spent a lot of time with them, Steve. They spent, I think the whole tape is over an hour, and they actually checked in Brian to the hotel. There's the video
Right.
goes on, and he goes to the hotel. They called ahead. They said, get a room for this guy. And when they got there, they said, I called you earlier. This is the guy that's going to be staying with you overnight. So, I mean, listen, it's 15 days. If it was the next morning, then I'd say those guys would really be, second guessing himself. But it was 15 days later. I don't know. There's probably a lot of other things they could have done. Maybe checked with the family back home and said, do you want to put your daughter on a plane and get her home? Something to that effect. But listen, it turned out the way it turned out. And I don't know. I just feel that those guys in New York, Bill, you can attest to this as well. In New York, would they have gotten that much time? I don't think.
No, they would have never gotten an hour of time to
Yeah.
decide what to do. It would have to
Yeah.
happen probably in
5 or
within
10 minutes.
10 minutes, 15 minutes.
I think it'd be the same here, and it would have been an arrest. I would imagine.
Yeah. Diane Wilson, thank you so much for the $5 super chat. Maureen Walsh, you're 100% right. They did find Gabby on the 19th. However, Red, White, and Bethune spotted that van on the 27th of August, and that gave the timeline as to when they thought that Gabby was actually killed on the 27th, and the autopsy lent credence to that when they said that she was dead for 3 to 4 weeks once they found her. But thank you very much, reminded me that she was found on September 19th. Guys, we're going to stay on for a little while longer, but it's so great to have Stephen Keogh here, very knowledgeable guy. One thing we want to remind a lot of you folks listening, one of the big differences between crime fighting in Great Britain and crime fighting in the United States is the prevalence of guns in the United States. And the amount of guns we have is like off the chart. And in London and most European countries, there's not the prevalence of firearms. So we have to approach everything believing that there could be a firearm involved. The other thing is that I would feel naked if I had to walk into somebody's horrendous buildings without a firearm. And I don't know how you guys do that in London when you go into some really bad buildings and you're not strapped. What do you carry? A shillelagh? What do you carry?
I just think we're tougher.
I got to ask Steve a question about that because that strikes me too that they don't carry firearms. But we just had a few days ago, actually the day before Thanksgiving, we had 2 police officers shot. They got a call, man with a gun. They saw the guy that fits the description. As they approached him, he got the gun. I don't know if he had it secreted in his jacket, but he fired some shots. He was shot. The 2 officers were shot. Everybody survived, thank God. But if you're not armed and you get a call, man with a gun, I mean, how do you handle that? Do you go get a gun, or is somebody sent with a gun? How does that work, Steve?
If someone's got a gun, we do have armed officers, but it's not us. So you would get they would come in armed response vehicles. But I've got to be honest, right? So since I knew I was retiring, I went onto LinkedIn, and I've started networking on LinkedIn. I'm in with a lot of law enforcement officers from the States, and I've started to see the posts they put up about how many police officers are shot. And although we're not armed, police officers dying in the UK, thankfully, is quite rare. It's like every couple of years that it might happen. I'm seeing it almost on a weekly basis. Some form of law enforcement officer in the States is getting murdered. So, yes, all right, we don't carry guns, but I feel much, much safer than you probably do.
Well, Steve, this has been one of the worst years in the United States nationally for the death of police officers, line of duty deaths. Right. And a lot of that has to do with the whole defund the police, the disrespect for the police, and that was encouraged by a lot of people. And I think that's one of the reasons cops have to second guess themselves 2, 3, 4 times before they protect themselves. And they're second guessed all the time, not just by politicians, but by the media, by everyone. So it's making it, it's almost like they've tried to ruin the most honorable profession on this earth, and they're trying to ruin it. Joe Murray wants to interject himself again.
He woke up.
Thank you for the $4.99 super chat, but he says, leave it to you gold shields trying to second guess the white shield cops who did an amazing job. Joe, we're not second guessing. We're just.
No, I thought that they did a great job. I got no problem with what they did. I really don't. I said that.
Leave it to the attorney to try to create doubt on what we're trying to do. trying to create beyond a reasonable doubt. He's trying to do it. But Joe Murray has his own podcast called Allegedly Guilty. And we support Joe. He supported us for a long time. And he's got another $4.99 chat, so I'll have to read what he said. Keep sending them in. I'll read what you said. We White Shield cops at Allegedly Guilty support the job those cops did 100%. Shout out to my pal Paul Redding, who is a cop in London. Joe, I was talking about your performance against the London Bobbies about 20 years ago. How did you do in that fight? I know you were a heavyweight. Did some London Bobby lay a left hook on your jaw or what?
My money's on Joe. I don't know. He's got a history of knocking out cops.
Yeah, that's right. No, but only detectives. If the guy was a detective, he would have probably knocked him out. But I don't know what happened there.
Good man, Joe Murray. Good luck with the show, Joe.
Steve, it's funny. Besides what we cover to be a very serious matter, you have to have humor in these shows, and that's what cops are all about. Cops are. You could stand over the most horrendous things. Both Phil and I are 9/11 first responders. We have to deal with all the memories and the health problems from that. But, you have to be able to have a sense of humor about it, or else what's the alternative?
If anyone looks at my channel, I've started doing these lives where I'll just go on there. I've no idea what's going to happen. And I'll just talk to my subs. And we just spend most of the time laughing. And it's a serious subject. Of course, we're talking about murder. But you've got to have a sense of humor, haven't you?
Well, who's this guy? I never... Do you know who that is? He seems like he's got a much shorter haircut than you.
And I want to be in the box with that guy.
And this
one really annoyed me, right? So this was a reporter who went to my book, and all he could come up with from my book, it's literally the first book that's ever looked at how Scotland Yard investigate murders. It's the first one of its kind. It goes right behind the scene, and it goes from crime scene to court. It goes through everything. And what he took away from my book was one little section where I talk about how many murders are solved has gone down since budget cuts. Like, mate, I put an awful lot of effort into this book, and that's all you can come out with, having read it, about budget cuts.
Well, something,
agenda, don't they? But I was like, oh, come on.
Steve, last orders, please, just gave us a $5 super chat, and he said, Stephen, come to my pub in Manchester, and the beer is on me. So being on our show is already paying dividends. Look at that.
That's good.
Amazing.
He's satisfying the audience tonight, that's for sure.
Diane Wilson, I really wish the gun laws in America and other countries could be changed. We work fine in the UK without. Get a license if you want to go hunt. Julie Jackson, thank you. Nikki UK, we're doing okay. We have lots of support here on YouTube and Facebook and other friends who stayed by us. Stephen, what is the name of your show?
Murder Academy.
Murder Academy.
What I'm doing is I want to turn my subscribers into the most knowledgeable true crime fans in the world. That's my goal. So I'm basically just teaching them about murder. So it's how we do things. There's like videos up there where you can learn different bits of murder. I'm going to be looking at certain crimes. I'll go on, we have a chat, we have a laugh. I'm really enjoying it at the moment. I've got some absolutely fantastic subs that I really enjoy chatting to. It's going well. So Murder Academy.
You know what, Steve, what's the amazing thing is that you get to speak to people from all over the world. And I find that really great, because even though someone could live in London, South Africa, they could live in Ireland, they can live in anywhere in the world, they come on here and we're all friends and we talk and everyone's respectful. Oh, Joe Murray 100%. He keeps dropping money, so I'll read what he said. I dropped a handful of London's finest, but I lost to Paul Redding twice. He is now head coach. He took over from Bill Sharp. So he's even dropping names from the London Bobbies boxing team. That's how guilty he feels. Quote of the night, Schmitty, quote of the night, Stephen. I just think we're tougher. That's awesome. Dipped in hot salted butter. There's a fan. There's a fan of police off the cuff. Maui Swift. Stephen, there are a lot of knife murders I've heard in the UK. Is that true, Stephen?
Yeah. So the vast majority of murders I dealt with were knives. You can't
Not
get a
too many
gun,
guns.
but you can go into a supermarket and buy a knife for a pound. So yeah, knives are a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, something that's what the over here in our Constitution, it says you have the right to keep and bear arms, and that's what gives us the right to own firearms. And people in the United States take it as a personal attack against their constitutional rights when government wants to take away those rights. And if you watched the riots across this country in the last year and a half, you understand why people choose to bear arms, because the government did not protect the people. And that's why the whole Constitution gives you the right to protect yourself. Because when government refuses to protect you, here I am. I'm running for office. When government
I feel like I've
refuses,
been dragged into a political show here.
something. Look,
Coppers, not politicians. What's going
no, but
on?
Stephen, something. As I said earlier on the show, police work and politics go hand in hand, and at least in our country, there's no such thing.
It really isn't. I can honestly say politics has never played a part in my career. Yeah, it's weird hearing you talk about that, because we just don't get involved in it.
I got to add one little thing to what Billy said. We have in the Constitution, we have the right to bear arms to protect ourselves from a tyrannic government. So that's and that's what happened over the last year or two when the government, what he said was 100% true. Businesses were burnt, property was destroyed, people were killed, and the police were being held back, which is completely not justified at all. And then we had this defund the police movement that came out of the riots that started from the George Floyd incident. And as the more steam it picked up, the higher crime went, the higher the murder rate went. I mean, Chicago, one city in the United States, they have weekends where 100 people are shot and maybe a dozen or two are killed in a weekend. So
that's
think about
mental.
that. It's really, and it just keeps going. I mean, they're busting into all of these high-end stores over the last week or two. I think it was in California. They destroyed a Nordstrom. It was like 80 people got together. They mobilized off of social media. They went in, they just wreaked havoc. They stole all kinds of crap, and then they ran, and then they did it. They were going to do it again. They went into a Home Depot to just steal the tools, the sledgehammers and the crowbars to smash the cases and stuff. And, who knows what's going to happen with that one. So as much as that politics, we try to stay out of it, but we get pulled right into it because that's who controls the police departments in all the cities in the United States.
That's just crazy. It really, it's completely foreign to me. Yeah. The politicians do not get involved in our policing, and that's the way it should be, because let them do what they do and we do what we do.
You're 100% right.
He should hear some of the antics that the local prosecutors are pulling in the New York area. I mean, there was a time about 2 years ago, all in the 5 boroughs of New York City, all the prosecutors got together, all the district attorneys, and said, we're not going to prosecute marijuana crimes anymore. We're not going to prosecute urinating in public, all these low-level crimes. And then petty larceny, shoplifters, they're not going to press. And it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And in some of the areas, stores are forced to close down because they're being cleaned out. In San Francisco, they had all the Walgreens that were in an area. They closed them down because they were pilfering them, and they wouldn't charge the same thing. The prosecutors in that area, they wouldn't charge. So, the petty crimes. And I hate to get political, but it is what it is. This is where we're
in our country, policing and politics is really, unfortunately, goes hand in hand. Maui Swift, thank you so much for the $13.99 super chat. Factual breakdown. Last orders, please, comes from Andy the Gabby Cabby. Andy the Gabby Cabby, great man. Thank you for the $5 super chat. We're at an hour and 18 minutes, and I think we got to sort of start giving our final goodbyes. And Steve, I just want you to promise that you'll come back on the show.
I've really enjoyed it. Yeah, and I feel like I've got so much more that we could talk about as well.
Oh, forget about it. Liz, first of all, Phil and I are big bullshit artists, so we could talk. We could talk for hours on any topic. We love to talk. No, we know our stuff. Believe me, we both know our stuff. But the more you do this, the more you want to talk, and it's. I think that were pretty entertaining too, to tell you the truth. You know, people
We
come
should
back.
collaborate on that Adelphi case again with Steve. You know,
Yeah,
Bill,
I mean, that's a very, very. I really have to really read up on that because
Yeah.
I've seen. So, there was a guy who was from a Cold Case Society. I forget his name now, but he did an excellent YouTube breakdown on that case by himself.
Right.
And I can't think of his name right now, but he did a really good job. And I watched his presentation, and that was basically all I knew about. I didn't read documents, and that's what you really need to do.
Yeah.
Dog is spelled backwards. Bill, you trash talking a lot tonight, blaming the Biden administration, increasing murders, and calling the community affairs officer a cop who doesn't want to work. Are you trying to impress Steve? No, not at all. I believe firmly that the Democrats have destroyed this country with their anti-police philosophy, and you know that's my opinion. And they're the only ones that have been behind defunding the police. No one else. Every city in the United States that crime is out of control is run by Democrats. Sorry.
And Bill, you wouldn't be saying any of these things if they defunded police and crime went down, would you? I mean,
no, I don't think I would be at all. And community affairs, it was a half a joke and half serious. They're not wearing those light blue jackets because they're running into buildings, you know, going after gunmen. Trust me.
How many collars do they make? Too?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
They're not an enforcement unit.
No, they're not. And you know, they used to call them the hug squad, or you know, they hug people, stuff like that. That's fine. We need people that do that.
Yeah.
But
there's a spot for them. I mean, they need, you know, they have their position in the police department. They're effective at what they do, 100%.
Surely you should invite one of them on one day, and you can have.
I should invite a community affairs officer, and he'll say, "You got us wrong. You know what we do?" And I'll be like, "Well, yeah, let me know. What do you do?" You know, I'm sorry, I'm a sarcastic mofo, and you can look up mofo if I cleaned it up a little bit.
Yeah,
but. As I said, I said this to my cops. I say it to my audience. I'm not for everybody. You know what I mean? I'm an acquired taste. And, you know.
You got 23,000 people that have acquired your taste. How you doing?
Yeah, a little bit. But you know something, though? I'm going to, this is freedom of speech, and this is my freedom of speech. You know what I mean? And someone just wrote, "Let's go, mofo."
How did you feel? When I left the police, it felt like I could suddenly be me and talk about things.
Exactly.
Because in the police, you've always got this thing on your shoulder. You can't say that. Yeah, no,
you're 100% right. I felt free for the first time in my life. But then when I went to the subway station and realized I did not know how to use a Metro card.
You have to pay.
Because I always used to just show my shield and they'd let me in. I didn't know how to enter the subway. I felt like
retired. They aren't retired too. You don't even need that. You can still do it.
Yeah, now no one pays for the subway. They just jump the turnstile. And that's what I do now. I just jump the turnstile.
That's one of the other things that they stopped prosecuting the 5 boroughs, going through the turnstile or not paying your fare on the subway. They don't.
I bet they'd prosecute you if you did it though, wouldn't they?
Yeah, you're right. They probably would. Marilyn, I got to read this since some people are giving me a beating and criticizing me. I got to read this from Marilyn Mineta. You boys are awesome. I love and look forward to every show. And now I'm hooked. Happy holidays to all of you. I love listening to you guys.
Marilyn, that was the question that I answered before. She asked about Summer Wells. If she was, she said that she felt that there was an accident by the garden, and she asked about the swimming hole. That's the comment. That's the from the chat.
And you know, Marilyn,
come to the Murder Academy as well.
He's trying to steal our subscribers right in front of our face. You see that?
Cross-pollination, Bill. It's cross-pollination.
Right. Marilyn, thank you so much. I hope you didn't just make that nice response because Phil's Italian and you're Italian. But I appreciate it. Anyway. Rodhound, thanks for the $6.99 super chat. Really good synergy, fun show. You know, sometimes I just rant. You know, and you know, that's what this is good for. You know. Come join me tomorrow morning with Coffee with Cannon, and where I have a coffee cup, but I don't really drink coffee.
That's the softer, quieter, calmer Bill.
That's right.
Something happens after 4 p.m.
That's right. I'm much calmer. Anyway, Steve, thank you so much for coming on the show. And as I said, you have an open invitation. Send me an email. You can come on whenever you want. You know, maybe we'll do a show with you on a high-profile murder or something. And,
yeah, I love that. Really good. I've enjoyed this. It's good.
It's been great. And I wish you could buy us a beer, but you can't.
He's going to be getting free beer from our show. That guy.
That's right. You always got invited. And go to my pub in Manchester. I'll buy you beer.
Here comes the actor Bill now.
That's right. All right, guys.
I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the show you did promise to fly me over at some point.
That's right. And by the way, guys, they say put on your helmet, get in the game. Here I am. I'm getting in the game with my helmet. My Bobby helmet.
Go on, Bill.
All right. Even though we're going way too long, Phil, last comments, and we got to go.
Real quick, last comments. I just want to make a point about, first of all, Steve, thank you for coming on. It was great to have you. We got the perspective of what goes on across the pond. I think basically we were paralleling same stuff that we do, just a little bit different with the wording, like you said. But you made a point real quick about sometimes we're on the scene of something. We might look like we're kidding around. We know when to be serious. When we're dealing with family, they just went through a tragic loss, especially in a murder or a missing person case like Summer Wells. We don't kid around. We do what we have to do. There are times when something might appear to be funny or something, and we just, to get through it, we do have a quick laugh or something like that. But this business is serious business. Murder investigation is serious business. You're speaking for the victim, and you're trying to get justice for them, and that's nothing to be taken lightly. I never did. I know Bill never did, and I'm sure you never did. But again, to get through it sometimes, we were on the pile at ground zero, and we're able to crack a smile here and there at times. So it's just part of life. It's the only way we get through it.
Yeah.
Steve, final words. What was it? God bless the USA. Is that what you just said?
Not quite sure that was what I was going to say. Rule Britannia, I think I was going to say. Listen, boys, it's been an absolute pleasure. It really has. I've enjoyed it.
It's been great. So, folks, on behalf of Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories, I'm Bill Cannon, and my co-host, Phil Grimaldi. We thank Steve Keogh for coming on the show. Good night, everyone, and be safe.
Cool.
Stay safe, everybody.
Take care.
One episode just ain't enough.